May God open our eyes to see, our ears to hear, our hearts to love. Healing your own heart first. Healing your own heart first is the spiritual equivalent of instructions given by a flight attendant. If an oxygen mask descends from the panel above your seat, secure your own mask before assisting others. If you don't have your own oxygen supply, you won't be able to help others. Presumably there's a real need for people to be told this. Perhaps it's particularly necessary for parents of young children who are pretty much programmed to care for their offspring before they think of their own needs. Without our own oxygen masks firmly in place and our blood supply and brains receiving nourishment, we cannot be there for others. The heart is a metaphor for the spirit. Making sure that our spirit is connected to an oxygen source is equally important for spiritual care of our body selves and the body selves of others. We should not be making a choice between caring for ourselves and caring for others. It isn't a matter of egotistically grabbing the oxygen for ourselves or of holding on to a spiritual path that says, because I'm okay, everything is okay. It's simply a matter of process. Oxygen mask on, then help others. Healing our own hearts before we try to save the world. And the healing, like the oxygen mask, is a process. We're connected to the source of life, but we don't just sit there enjoying the process of getting oxygen. We begin immediately to be aware of those around us, those with whom we are in community. I chose the title for this week's sermon, Healing Your Own Heart First, after reading the passage from Mark about the exorcism of the demon. My mind translating this ancient Near Eastern worldview of demon possession into a contemporary understanding of mental illness. But for those of us who were teens or adults in the 70s, it's pretty much impossible to read anything about exorcism without thinking about Linda Blair and that truly awful, scary movie, The Exorcist. I think I was about 16 when I saw the movie, and it gave me nightmares for weeks. And now most of us are bemused or appalled to learn that some clergy still perform exorcisms, and that exorcism is a recognised rite in Anglican and Catholic churches. We believe, most of us, that what looked like demon possession is most likely a form of mental illness. But in this story, Jesus tells the demon that's possessing a person to shut up and get out. As a response to mental illness, this would be completely unacceptable. As I read and thought more about what demon possession actually means in this text, I began to realise that simply translating it as a metaphor for mental illness is not altogether helpful. There is a sense in which Jesus is speaking and acting toward the possession that is part of the human condition. Ian Cairns, in his commentary, Mark of a Non-Realist, explores possession in terms of human psychology. Though he modernises the idea of the demon-possessed man by calling him mentally disturbed, Cairns explores the concept of unclean spirit in ways that speak both to those who are labelled as mentally ill and to those who are labelled sane or normal, for want of better words. Cairns says, on this basis, a person's mind or spirit could be seen to be clean when it is integrated and clearly focused, where the mind which is split or lacking ability to focus could be said to be unclean. The understanding of mind, spirit, heart involves all of us. It invites us to think about what possesses us. It invites us to live intentionally in ways that will free us from possession, from ideologies, and from material concerns that cause us to become fragmented. 2 days after Australia Day, or Survival Day, it invites us to confront ideologies of nationalism and racism. And it was so encouraging to see that confronting the possession of the celebration of national identity at the expense of Black history is a demon that increasing numbers of Australians wish to confront. I think too of the phrase, when somebody does something stupid, "What possessed you?" What possesses us? Demonic possession occurs when we are completely overwhelmed with the demands and the prohibitions that we encounter in our culture. It's a loss of self in a world that is overwhelmed so often by a culture of materialism and a drive for power. The true self is completely sublimated to imitation of other selves. This story tells us that Jesus loosens the bonds between the powers and our sense of self, that Jesus liberates us from our self-destructive tendencies. Demonic possession, in this sense, is very real, very terrifying, and often very dangerous. Healing our hearts, reorienting ourselves towards a sense of relation that respects the selves of others, is our life's work. So shut up and get out becomes not violent, but strongly compassionate. And compassion is the hallmark of Jesus' God. So Jesus' healings and exorcisms, which play such a major role in his ministry, even though they are quite embarrassing for postmodern readers, are about manifestations of God's reign on earth now, an inbreaking of eternity into time, a revelation of God's compassionate nature, a promise of the restitution of all things in the heart of the loving source of the universe. Jesus' understanding of what he's doing is recorded in his claim in Matthew's Gospel. But if it is by the finger of God that I cast out demons, then the reign of God has come to you. God's non-violent reign is the overcoming of demonic powers through non-violent means. This makes exorcism, the concept of exorcism, something very different than what was going on in that very scary movie. Exorcism actually preoccupied the early church. They understood that baptism was a form of entry exorcism, freeing the baptized one from the delusional system that had previously held him or her in bondage. Exorcism was not a rare or extreme intervention. It was the necessary prerequisite for getting a new mind. Jesus' teaching is itself a kind of exorcism, a cleansing of the mind, cleansing of the kind of misinformation that enslaves people to what Walter Wink calls the powers. And faith is a healing of unseeingness, humanity's trained inability to perceive God's presence even when it is happening before our very eyes. This understanding of possession and exorcism gives us a way of connecting with the text and being enlightened and enlivened by it within our postmodern worldview. The other point that I want to make this morning is about faith community as the context for this healing. We are not called to sit alone in our seats or in our pews, sucking our own oxygen. There may be times when we really do need to do this, to restore ourselves, to heal our own hearts from what possesses us. But this is not our end. Meaning and purpose become clear when we live in mutual relation and shared power with others in community. Both the Corinthians text and the Markan text are about the worshipping community, the context for wholeness for those who choose to follow the way of Jesus. The Corinthian text connects freedom in Christ and responsibility toward the community. When Paul uses the word love or agape in verse 1, it has little to do with fuzzy feelings, but everything to do with the way that we treat others. The word respect may indeed be a better word than love. Paul is pushing the worshipping community at Corinth to treat one another with respect and with care. As a worshipping community, we don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to treat one another with respect. Paul is echoing Jesus' reminder that all the commandments can be summed up in 2 commandments: love God and love your neighbour. Relate to the divine presence with awe and respect, and treat other people, and we would add now the whole planet, with respect. Yes, you are free in Christ, Paul says, but that freedom in Christ requires you to treat others and the earth with respect. The Mark text, too, takes place in the midst of the worshipping community. It is the Sabbath, and Jesus and his disciples arrive in the synagogue in Capernaum and teach. The man with the unclean spirit interrupts, and Jesus says, "Be silent, come out of him. Shut up, get out." Everybody was shocked, asking if this power comes from a new teaching or some new kind of authority. This shock goes to the heart of Jesus' teaching about the reign of God, the community of Christ, Christa community, the community that is coming and is here even now. If understood from the perspective of empire, from the perspective of the powers that be, the answer is yes. This is a new teaching and a new kind of authority, and it is meant to undermine the powers that be. The worshipping community will form around the reign of God and Jesus' teaching and power, and this power will emerge in the life of the community, from the life of the community. Our text this morning pose questions for all of us, people who are fragmented and divided and possessed. So what possesses you? What possesses us? What possesses me? I have my own list, and I'm sure you have yours. Thinking of a few of them, I would name my reliance on caffeine to give me a lift and on wine to wind me down. I would name the need to be in control, which a few of you probably will relate to, knowing me, but also the fear of looking foolish and the need to be busy in order to be deemed of value. And then there are the grudges that I struggle to let go of. Thinking particularly about the last one, about grudges, there have been times when I have been unwilling to let go of conflicts and deep differences that I've had with another person. I think it's so tempting to continue to poke the bruise, to help me remember the injustice, to keep looking for evidence to confirm my negative opinion of the other person, to take some measure of satisfaction in my honestly earned anger and resentment. Sometimes we no longer remember what had actually hurt us in the first place, but we know that we have been wounded. We become possessed by the resentment. So we are called to remember that we are selves in community. Each member of the community who grows in love and wisdom helps the growth of the whole community. All members of the community are responsible for their own growth and that of the community as a whole. So connect to the oxygen and help others. Jean Vanier of L'Arche community taught about this kind of community. He taught that when we are at peace, when we have accepted our own deep wounds and weaknesses, when we are in touch with our own heart and capacity for tenderness, then actions flow from our true selves and become a source of growth. Vanier claims that true growth comes as members of a community integrate into their hearts and minds the vision and the spirit of the community. In this way, we choose community as it is and become responsible for it. So it is my prayer that this may be so for Pitt Street Uniting Church in 2018, as we support one another to exorcise the demons that possess us, personally and politically, as we grow in humanity and in the community of Christ, in Christa community. So may it be. Amen.